Welcome to today's presentation. We got a funny title here for you. Our crack marketing team is on it. Unicorns, Bigfoot, and good unified endpoint management. Exposing myths. What do these things have in common? My name's Nick Thompson, and I'll be your host today. Let's take a look at what our agenda is going to be. So first off, I'm going to do just a brief overview of Jamf, just to make sure everyone's on the same page here. Then we're going to discuss what it means to manage platforms and compare them to managing ecosystems. We'll then discuss really what's unique about the Apple ecosystem in general. Then we'll talk about how to do some integrations, really to build your single pane of glass that everyone really wants when it comes to managing devices. And we'll, of course, talk about some next steps and answer those questions at the end. So, brief overview here of Jamf. For those who aren't familiar with us, this is our tagline. We help organizations succeed with Apple. We don't do Windows management. We don't do Android management. We solely focus on Apple. And that's because we believe that the Apple platform is a really great tool for companies to really take advantage of all the great things that Apple does well with it. Now, we help organizations succeed with Apple with our two products. And those are called Jamf Now and Jamf Pro. Now is really our simple mobile device management tool, really no IT required there. It's really designed for smaller organizations or smaller deployments that does not have a large IT presence. Pro, of course, is designed for IT professionals. If you sort of look at what each product is capable of doing here, you see again now is really about easy device setup, simple management, whereas Pro kind of goes through the complete lifecycle management of Apple devices. This is what the products look like. It's all web-based, so you simply log into a web browser. You can access the admin consoles here. Today's presentation will primarily focus on Jamf Pro, just so you're aware. But if you do have a need for managing a smaller deployment, check out Jamf Now. It's free for up to 3 devices and really great just to get started with it. A little look at who uses Jamf. Well, we have over 10,000 organizations that rely on Jamf to manage their Apple devices. From some of the traditional Apple markets that you see out there, such as technology companies and the marketing groups out there, but also some of the really most valuable brands, Fortune 500 companies, and a lot of great schools use us as well, too. So that's enough about us. Let's talk about platforms and ecosystems. So the big question that always arises is, IT has to deal with all of these different platforms out there. They have to deal with iOS devices, Androids, Chromebooks, Windows desktops. If someone's using a Windows 10 phone, they have to deal with that. And of course, Macs as well too. The question is really what is common amongst all of them and how does IT organize them? So to frame up our discussion here, I want to first start with looking at all of these different operating systems and some of the different tasks that IT needs to do in the traditional life cycle of these devices. So first off, there's provisioning, right? This is preparing the device to be ready for management, to hand them over to the end user. When we look at Mac OS and iOS, they actually share a common provisioning tool, something known as Device Enrollment Program, and I'll talk a little bit more on that later. Windows 10 and 10 Mobile actually share a common provisioning tool that's known as Dynamic Provisioning via Azure AD, and that's completely different from what Chromebooks do and what Android does as well too. There's really no kind of equivalent to Device Enrollment Program. So when you look across these different platforms for provisioning, they're all provisioned in a slightly different way. Next, with encrypting devices, well, Mac OS has a built-in tool called File Vault, and iOS has a great way to turn on encryption just by enabling the password. And that's an entirely different thing from how Windows handles encryption. They use something called BitLocker. And of course, Chromebooks and Android have their own methodology for doing encryption as well too. Again, none of these are same across the different platforms here. The management framework for Apple devices is actually shared, known as mobile device management. Again, we'll talk more on that later. And Windows 10 and Windows 10 Mobile are both very similar, except Windows 10 has the ability to use SCCM, kind of their more legacy tools. And it's completely different from how you manage a Chromebook and how you manage an Android device. How you handle settings, again, Mac OS and iOS actually share a common language here with configuration profiles. And those are completely different from the group policies that you would set in Windows 10 and different from what you would do in Android and in Chromebooks as well too. And when it comes to licensing software, there's a common tool for Apple devices with their volume purchase program. And Windows has their own Windows Store for business, which again is different from how you do it from Apple. And Android has, of course, their own Google Play Store. So when we start thinking about platforms, we see that there's really not much that's the same across all of these things. Provisioning is entirely different across all of them. Encrypting is entirely different across all of them. Same with management framework and licensing. Instead, when you start looking for some commonalities, you see that they're really common among the ecosystems in which these platforms live. Apple has a similar way of doing provisioning for all their devices. Microsoft has a similar way of provisioning all of their devices. Apple has a similar management framework across all of them. And Microsoft has a similar encryption tool, etc. You kind of get where we're going here is that the ecosystems share a lot similar with each other here. So let's discuss the Apple ecosystem and really what's unique about it, because that's what we're really passionate here at Jamf, is everything Apple. And when we look at sort of the life cycle management of Apple devices, we kind of break it down into these categories. We think about how do we deploy these devices to our end users. Then how do we configure them with all of the right settings that we need to have in there? How do we get all of the correct applications and software onto those devices? How do we gather inventory data, make sure things are secure, and provide our users a unique way to get the software that they need on their own? So to illustrate this, I'm going to walk you through what it looks like to set up a brand new Mac using the device enrollment program here. So here I am booting up my Mac for the first time. And I go through the sort of familiar setup screens. I'm going to choose my region here, and then I'm going to choose my language for my keyboard. And I need to connect my Mac to the network. And in this case here, I'm just joining my own personal network, but of course you could have other networks that it joins as well too. After it talks to Apple's activation server, I get this notification here. It says, this Mac will be configured automatically by, and then you can insert your company name there. And this is really what device enrollment program is all about. It is configuring my device all over the air here without me as the end user needing to do anything. So I click Next, and I can't skip this step, which is really nice. And it now asks me to log in with my company ID and password. And that company ID can be whatever directory services that you happen to use. So I'm protecting it here. Then I get to create my local account, and this local account, my IT administrator can set some settings here for me. They can require a password here, and they can determine what sort of local account is created. They can specify if I can be an admin or if I'm going to just be a standard account, so no admin rights. And if I'm using network-based accounts, I could skip this step altogether here. So I create my account, I set up my Mac, and here I am brought to my home screen, and I get this great little notification. And if we zoom in on this notification and see what's really going on, we've got a couple of core pieces of technology happening in the background. This says installing some software and security settings. Check out self-service for more resources. So what happened here? Well, we wirelessly provisioned this Mac using a technology called DEP. We installed some software using something called VPP, and we applied some settings using MDM. We're going to talk about these three core pieces of technology and why they're unique to Apple. So if I zoom back out on my Mac here, I'll also then open up self-service, which is a great tool for providing users just a one-click shopping here for all the different enterprise resources that they may need. So if I need to install HipChat or if I need to install Outlook, I can just click on those things and that happens all in the background. You as IT actually get to populate this with whatever you would like. So talking about those three pieces of technology now. First off, DEP. What is this? This is Apple's device enrollment program. So it is a program from Apple that you sign up for as an organization. And this really allows for zero-touch deployment, meaning IT doesn't have to touch devices at all. And this works not only on Mac, but also on iOS and even Apple TVs. So you could hand a device to a user, they open it up for the first time, and they go through that experience that we just saw there in the last few slides. The way this works is you simply order devices from Apple or from your reseller that supports device enrollment program, and you essentially flag the serial number to say this is owned by my organization. Then during the setup, these devices are automatically enrolled into your management tool. And if you have some older devices, you can actually backdate them. So anything that was purchased back to March 1st of 2011, if you have an Apple account, you can backdate those so that they are tied to your device enrollment program. The second piece of technology that was happening here is Apple's volume purchase program, or VPP. And this is, again, another program that you sign up for with Apple. And it lets you license Mac and iOS apps from their app stores. You can then distribute that software, those codes for that software, either directly to your individuals or directly to the device. And what's really great is if you distribute it to the device, that means your users do not have to use an Apple ID. So it's really, really helpful. Apple thought through a lot with Apple IDs in the enterprise and really helped solve that problem here. And again, it's a free program that you just sign up for with Apple. The third piece of technology that was happening in the background here was something called mobile device management, or MDM. And this is really Apple's built-in management framework to all of their operating systems. And it really just lets you build these profiles. And these profiles define various settings that are inside of the operating systems, such as turning on something or turning off something. And these are all delivered over the air thanks to a push notification service that Apple has. And that essentially maintains a constant connection to your devices so you don't have to. And you can build all these profiles here using a management tool like Jamf. Here's some examples of some of the profiles that you can build using MDM configuration profiles. So they can be things like defining a password, restricting various things, configuring your network, Wi-Fi settings, VPN, defining your email accounts, setting some security settings, deploying certificates, very popular, and doing some advanced things like defining how Finder behaves or how your dock behaves. Now, what's interesting on the Mac side of things is we at Jamf, we actually take this even one step further too, and we install an agent for Macs. So this is something that is proprietary to Jamf, and it lets you take it beyond MDM for just the Mac management piece here. And it's actually just a binary that gets installed automatically after enrollment. And it lets you, as the IT administrator, define a hidden admin account for your computers. And why would you want a hidden admin account? Well, that enables you to then have remote root access to your Macs. So you get to define what this admin account is named and what the password is for that admin account. And what's really nice too is you could have that password just be auto-generated and rotate as well too. And this lets you execute far more than what just MDM is capable of doing, such as running policies, scripts, installing third-party software, and much more. Here's some examples again. So you could install package files or DMG files. That means apps beyond the Mac App Store. You could run scripts. So anything that you could execute in terminal could be a script. Install printer drivers, turn on File Vault. You could modify your user accounts, bind your Macs to a directory, set the firmware password, and much, much more. This is really kind of endless here, especially with scripts, because anything can be a script again that you can run via the terminal. So this is what the management framework looks like for Apple devices. 3 core programs from Apple: device enrollment program, volume purchase program, mobile device management as a framework, and on the Mac side of things, using Jamf here, our agent that takes it beyond MDM. And what's great for DEP, VPP, and MDM is these are the same across all of Apple's platforms. This is the same in Apple TV as it is in iPhone, as it is on the Mac, and on iPad. Now, of course, there's some nuances to that, but the core principles are the same across all of these. And if we look back here at our lifecycle management, what were the pieces of technology that affected each of these categories here? Well, here they are, right? DEP for deploying, MDM and the Jamf agent for configuring the settings, VPP for deploying apps, MDM and the agent for getting inventory data, MDM and the agent again for securing things. And I showed you self-service earlier, which is really that app catalog that you can build that has MDM and agent capabilities all within there. So that's the Apple ecosystem and kind of what's unique about it. So let's get back to our core thing here of what does it mean to manage devices by ecosystem? And how do I then achieve sort of this single pane of glass? So if we go back to this slide again, IT has to deal with all of these multiple platforms out there. We know that Apple devices don't just live on their own. They live with Windows devices. They live with Android devices. So the question for IT is, well, how do we organize them for management? And this is sort of what we've seen in the marketplace so far here. They organize them by what the device actually is. So I've got my desktops here, and then I typically would do something like this where I'd put all of my desktops in its own EMM tool, Enterprise Mobility Management Tool. I'd put all my tablets then in its own Enterprise Mobility Management Tool, and I'd put all my phones in one as well too. But then, of course, people kind of say, well, tablets and phones, they're kind of the same thing, right? When iPad came out, everyone just said, oh, it's a big iPod Touch or it's a big iPhone. And so this is what a lot of people have done. They said, great, we've got our desktop team and we've got our mobile team. And actually, sometimes these are 2 physically separate teams altogether within IT. But if we start to think about how does this actually play out, we start to run into a couple of issues. First off, if you happen to be using Chromebooks, well, we know you don't really use a desktop EMM tool for that. You use Google's G Suite because that's what it's designed for. Then, well, we at Jamf, we know that a lot of customers don't use a desktop EMM tool to manage their Macs. They use us to manage their Macs. So you end up with something like this. Then when we start looking at our tablets here, boy, I've got this very pretty Microsoft Surface device, but it's really not a tablet. It's kind of more like a desktop because it's really running the similar software. So a lot of organizations then start to do this, where they say, okay, great, the tablet or Surface is basically just a Windows 10 box. Then if anyone happens to be using a Windows 10 phone out there, I know Microsoft just talked about discontinuing support for them, but they're really just a Windows 10 device as well too, so you end up with something like this. And a lot of organizations start to realize, boy, we actually have a tool from Microsoft that can do this. And it's typically, people do this. They say, great, I can just use Intune to manage my Windows devices, Intune and maybe SCCM as well. But then we start adding some more things on. We have this whole new category of devices. We've got these displays. And these are sort of little mini computers in and of themselves. You know, Microsoft is building this giant Surface device, which is basically just a Windows 10 machine. And Google has these Chrome boxes, which is basically a Chromebook that is managed through G Suite. And of course, Apple has Apple TV, which now has full MDM capabilities. And we were one of the first ones to come out with MDM for Apple TV. So we've seen a lot of folks start to buy licenses for Apple TVs with us. So here we are now with a whole lot of different devices all spread across different management tools. Then when you think about it even further too, you know, we've got all those Apple services that we have to think of, right? We've got DEP, we've got VPP and MDM, and that's all linked into our Jamf server here. And if our iOS devices are sitting in a different one, if they're sitting in a mobile EMM tool, I've got another set of DEP, VPP, and MDM tools there. And there can be some conflict sometimes with that. So the question arises then, well, maybe I could put them all in some sort of universal endpoint management tool. And it's a tempting thought, right? Because you end up getting a single pane of glass. But if we go back and we look at our table here, organized by ecosystem, we find out, boy, there's really not a whole lot that's the same across these devices. Provisioning's not the same. Encryption's not the same. The management framework's not the same, etc. But there is commonality within that ecosystem. So, you know, trying to find this universal tool is, and here's why we called it Bigfoot slide, is trying to find something that might not exist. So, you know, should you as an organization look to a universal endpoint management tool? You know, can't say it would be, completely the best thing to do because it really doesn't highlight what's great with each of the different ecosystems. So we go back to where we were. What we believe here at Jamf is to not put everything all into one and sort of play to the lowest common denominator of each device or of each platform, but again, to think of them by ecosystem, to verticalize them, and to have all of your Apple devices be in one ecosystem management tool, all of your Windows devices be in one, and all of your Google devices be in one. So you end up with really this ecosystem management tool here. But of course, you know, how do I get my single pane of glass? Well, we think we have a solution for that. And that solution is to use tools that are specifically designed to be inventory management or business intelligent tools, such as ServiceNow, Splunk, Tableau, and Domo. All best-of-breed tools that are designed for inventory management and for business intelligence. And you can take a lot of these tools here and export your inventory data or automatically sync your inventory data to them. Of course, as we expand on this here, we have this whole question of identity management. Identity management is a really popular topic now for management here. And, you know, it's not something that's necessarily built into MDM tools or EMM tools, but rather they integrate with them because they work across all different platforms. Things like Okta, Ping, OneLogin work across Apple devices, Windows devices, and Google devices. We keep expanding on this here. We, of course, need directory services, things like Active Directory or Open Directory, or these really new popular things where you have directory as a service through somebody like Jump Cloud. And again, these directory services work across the different ecosystems. These are becoming what is the commonality between them. And lastly, of course, you want network access. Things like Cisco ICE or Aruba networks or Wandera, where you can control who gets on or off the network. And they don't care which devices they are. They are best of breed at those networks. So this is what our vision here is at Jamf of how to handle these different platforms. Not to think of them as just platforms, but to look at them by ecosystem. So you end up with these fully managed platforms arranged by ecosystem with purpose-built tools that have integrations for your enterprise systems. So to recap here, we looked at Jamf Pro and everything that it's sort of capable of doing here, from going through zero-touch deployments to configuring the devices with MDM and the Jamf agent. Zero-touch, again, was through DEP. Deploying apps with VPP, gathering inventory data, securing those devices, and having your users be able to access tools when they need it. Some technical details for you. Jamf, the server component, can either be cloud hosted or run on-premise. If you're doing it cloud hosted, we've got data centers in North America and EU. Automatic, easy upgrades, and we use AWS as our infrastructure. On-prem, it is a very lightweight server, so you can run it on just about anything, Linux, Windows, Mac OS server. It's really just a Tomcat or a MySQL database talking to Tomcat. And all of this, is possible because we integrate with Apple's core services here. We integrate with DEP, with VPP. We use Apple's push notification service to tie everything, the communication of the devices to the client together. If you're a school, they have a new program called Apple School Manager, which really combines DEP and VPP. And we have all of these great third-party integrations that helps build out that vision of having your best-of-breed tools for directory services with like Active Directory, having your best-of-breed single sign-on tool for identity management. We work with single sign-on providers. For inventory, we also work with SCCM. So if you're using SCCM, you could actually take the inventory data out of Jamf and sync it over to SCCM, so you could run inventory reports there. We work with Cisco ICE for all of the great network integrations there. ServiceNow, wonderful business intelligence tool for gathering all your inventory data in ServiceNow and actually doing some software fulfillment through it as well too. Plus, we have an extensible API, so if we don't have an integration listed here, you could essentially build one out using the API. Some next steps for you. Check out our website. We've got sales and engineer folks across the globe ready to talk to you about what this looks like for your environment. Highly recommend you reach out to them. We've got the little chat button down there in the lower right-hand corner. Start chatting with us right away. Check out some of our other webinars if you want to dive deeper into any of these topics. And check out Jamf Nation. Wonderful resource. We've got 40,000 IT members here that are simply discussing what it means to manage Apple devices, both with Jamf and, of course, beyond Jamf as well, too, because we live in a larger ecosystem within IT. So check it out. Lots of great discussions there. With that, I want to thank everyone, and that concludes the presentation here.